So I'm going to try not to overlap too much with my colleagues. We have much in common. I have a slightly different take today. I'm often asked to advise museums around me of different sorts on specific programs that they want to start, or what to do in response to a request for an accommodation, and so forth. And it occurred to me a number of years ago that if every museum had a really solid foundation, then they would be able to go in many directions and really constantly move forward in their accessibility rather than being in a reactive position. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. So museums and accessibility, museums of all sorts have multiple opportunities. In the United States, we think about accessibility generally in three categories. One is physical accessibility, another is effective communications, and the third is programs and content. So those three all interact together, and they're all really important. There's not much good to get someone in the door if they can't access what's on the walls. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about working in a museum is we overlap with a lot of other cultural institutions in terms of what kinds of things we offer. So we have studio classes, we have lectures, we have performances, we have films. Many museums have auditoriums. So we bridge a lot of different kinds of cultural institutions, even though each of us has its own particular specialty. So in my case, it's I work in an art museum, what's considered a comprehensive art museum. On the screen right now is on your right is a photograph of a young man. Behind him is his teacher. He's holding a glass bowl that was created by the artist Dale Chihuly, and he's part of a visiting artist program working with a group of teenagers who comes to the museum regularly from the Perkins School for the Blind. And in this, I just want to, again, in this little overview, some of the things that we consider are, we have programs and opportunities that require pre-registration. They require people to plan in advance, but we also have many drop-in visitors, and we want our visitors of all abilities to be able to be spontaneous, so that if someone gets up in the morning and says, oh, I have the day off, I think I'd like to go to the museum, that they can actually do that. And we also want to welcome all ages. So these are kind of the parameters that inform my work in thinking about accessibility for the museum. So there's not one solution. Flexibility is required, and I feel that a foundation is essential, which is what this slide says. And I have identified 6 areas that I think about all the time, and in conversation with my colleagues and who are doing similar work, I find we're pretty much all on the same page. So I'm just going to read down this list, and then my slides will follow these 6 areas. So a commitment, assessment, training, planning, information, and choices. I was really hoping that I could come up with like a little word that the first initials would make, but I didn't come up with anything. So I needed a few more vowels or something. There we go. Cat pick. Thank you. That should have been obvious. I guess I was tired. Cat pick. So commitment. I think to really move as far as you can go towards complete total accessibility, however you want to think about it, an institutional commitment is required. It can't happen with 1 or 2 or a handful of people. It needs to be a commitment from the top, and it needs to kind of branch out through all parts of the organization. It's absolutely a team effort. I've found that in most mission statements for nonprofits, the commitment is there, even if it is not explicit. Most nonprofits have a mission statement that includes language that indicates that they want everyone to be part of this experience. And to me, that is a green light for moving forward with accessibility. It's imperative to think about the current visitors and also our future visitors. There's been a lot of discussion over the last few days that I've heard talking about the aging population. And that's certainly for any institution that wants to be relevant in 5 or 10 years, we need to think about that. But there are other changes as well. I know, unfortunately, we have many veterans coming home from overseas wars, and their lives and their abilities have changed, and we want to welcome them. So again, flexibility and also thinking about the possible range of visitors we might have. And finally, a commitment allows you as an institution to create policies and procedures. So when someone comes along and says, do I need to pay for my personal care attendant, then you have a policy in place and you say, well, in our case, we say no, personal care attendants come in for free. Assessment, what is your current situation? So Barry talked about a plan, and a plan is rather essential if you don't want to waste time or resources. So I think about it as a starting point if it's an institution that has not really got a good hold of access yet, as really looking at an opportunity to look at what do you do well, where are the holes, and moving forward from there. And I repeat on the slide what I mentioned earlier of physical communications, programs, and content. All of this needs to be assessed. It cannot be just one area. There's much overlap in people's needs and requirements. And I think there's so different institutions do it differently. Some choose to do an internal assessment, some do a combination, some bring in external folks to do the assessment, and I think there are advantages of both. The advantage of an internal assessment or having internal staff involved in an assessment means that there's a greater chance of real buy-in where they really own that piece of the assessment and of the plan, and that there's an opportunity there for each sector of the museum to really look at what their responsibility is. I know as one person, my job just a month ago was made full-time. I was 2/3 time, and our museum is quite large, and I work with facilities, exhibitions and design, visitor services, education. I have my own programs that I supervise, and I could go on, and there's no possible way that I could do that without a lot of teamwork and really working with other departments in the museum. Training. I've been so happy to hear so many people reference training. I think it's the single most essential thing, even if you haven't done anything else. To have staff training is, I just can't say enough about it, because you can have everything perfect and beautiful and fully accessible, and if the person that is greeting the visitors as they come through the door are not ready to communicate or to communicate in a welcoming manner, then you will destroy that person's visit. So it's very, very important. Think how to communicate, what to communicate, to have support from their managers, particularly when there are always things that happen that we cannot foresee happening. I know we sometimes have people come in with unusual mobility devices that they have they have figured out work for them. And sometimes it's a question for someone, should I let this person in? She uses a shopping cart. Well, we have a woman who uses a fold-up shopping cart, and it works beautifully for her. But it's not your typical mobility device. So training is ongoing. It's not a one-shot deal. We really need to have things in place, support materials, but also opportunities for people to go over. And I was it really hit me when Barry said they trained 40 staff in British Sign Language, and then a lot of them left. So a lot of visitor-facing staff positions have high turnover. So there has to be a mechanism in place for that. Planning. So building a solid foundation takes time. And I think that with a good plan and putting things that like staff training at the forefront, you can move forward in a good direction and know that you'll get where you're going. Might take a little while. And I can see my time is starting to tick down, so I don't think I need to say literally. Information, this is also something that has been discussed during the conference so far, and I have to repeat it because it's so important. And it's something that we're really struggling with as a museum every time I think we have, which is information and sharing it, and how much information do you put on the website? How do people find it? How do you categorize it? And every time I think that we have made some progress, I get a new request from someone that it would be really great if they could go on our website and know which of our bathrooms are sensory friendly, which is a good thing to think about, and we'll be working on that. So other essential pieces of information is, who do you go to request a specific accommodation? If you want to request, say, a sign language interpreter, how do you do that? So venues need a vehicle for that and a person for that. Who can someone go to if they have an unusual question? And finally, choices. I think choices are an essential part of reaching for equity. And on the screen right now, there are 3 photographs. On the left is a young woman who is touching a sculpture. And on the upper right is a small group of people, some with walkers, on a tour, a guided tour. And on the lower right is a photo of a multimedia guide, which is our mobile guide for people to come through the museum. And it's one of the best ways that we found for moving towards more options for people on a drop-in basis. And I'll just run through that really quickly. So on our handheld mobile guide, we have 8 languages, including American Sign Language, text transcript, headsets or neck loops as options, captioning, audio description, and the option of getting a device that's set on VoiceOver for screen reading. And let's see. And moving on to my next slide, again on choices. I just really can't say, this is my religion, is choices. That people should have, everyone should have choices, and that virtually every museum that I know of goes out of its way to create choices for part of its population, but not all of its population. They have different types of tours, different types of opportunities, and my goal is that we extend that for everybody. And I think I'm at the end. Thank you very much.
On retiendra de la communication de Mme Goodwin, entre autres, qu'au-delà des vœux pieux, la tente vers l'accessibilité, bien, ça s'organise, ça se planifie. C'est un projet de gouvernance, en bout de ligne, de façon très large, et qu'il y a aussi donc à être très pragmatique, effectuer les choix qu'il faut et prendre le temps. Je pense que c'est extrêmement intéressant de saisir cela. Je sais Je prendrai une question en feedback à la présentation de Mme Goodwin, si vous le souhaitez. Et sinon, je vais demander à la dame, oui, tantôt, de vous adresser. Je sais que vous aviez une question. Et puis par la suite, on pourra prendre quelques minutes pour considérer l'ensemble de ce qu'on a entendu et avoir vos réactions. Merci.
Thank you. Actually, my question could go to Ms. Goodwin or to the first presentation. I'm interested, I'm all for touch and feel, but I am interested to know how do you deal with the issue of health issues, wear and tear of the objects in a museum, and especially with so many health issues arising now. How do you deal at a museum with the constant touching and wear and tear of objects? That's my question.
Okay. It depends on our objects and whether they are permanently in the galleries or the fragility of the objects. So for the Ming vase that I displayed, anybody can touch that. It is regularly cleaned to try and, so therefore, it keeps sort of pristine. For some of our objects that normally we don't allow you to touch and we use as part of a touch object tour, then we'll ask our visitors to wear gloves. Now, people often say to me, why should a blind person, for example, wear gloves to touch an object? Well, you've got a choice. You either wear the gloves to touch the object or you just don't touch. So being a blind person, I'd rather touch the objects with gloves. So, for the health and sort of safety aspect, that then sort of protects the object as well as it, being a conservation issue for the object. But it's just regular cleaning and having a conservation plan for each of the touch objects.